Welcome to this month's installment of Wonder Women, Stories from the Women Who Play Bass. I'm here with Nalani, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. Nalani, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the series.
Thank you, Brittany.
Oh man, no, I'm honored. You know what? Because you're part of why the series even exists. I don't think most people know that. I'm gonna like give you my perspective right now on part of the story. So I want to maybe not take it all the way back, but I'm gonna take it all the way back. I know this is Nalani's interview, but I gotta talk about how we got here. So, one of the NAMM shows, she had mentioned to me about community, creating community with female bass players, mentoring each other. Where was that in the community? And we were at the Phoenix Club for the bass batch when you brought that up. And, I was like, oh, yeah. And right at that moment, Lynn Davis and Ariane Kapp walked through the door. And I said, let's go talk to them. And the next day, like 24 hours later, there was a whole pile of us having lunch together for the first time. That progressed forward. And by the way, you put the lunch together. So that was just like, my phone just started blowing up. Like, you just took point and put all that together. Every NAMM show since, to a point, I mean, COVID interrupted things, you continued to do that. And then even when COVID hit, there was a NAMM show, like time frame in January, where it had been canceled, where you put together a Zoom call. And I think we're all thinking it'd be like lunch. Like, we usually during the show, it's really quick. Like, it's going to be an hour. Everyone's got to get back to their booth or get back to their demo or get back to whatever they're doing for their sponsors and endorsements. And we were on the Zoom call for 4.5 hours.
I think it was actually 6.
What? Oh my God.
Yeah, it was long. It was really long. But precious.
It was. And so what was amazing about that Zoom call, and again, you put that together. So we had time to unpack all these stories from each other about our backstory, our history, how we showed up, how we got to play bass, how, what our thoughts and, our stories getting there, what bass meant to us, what we were doing with ourselves now. And every single woman who stepped up to the microphone when it was their turn, I was just floored.
Yeah.
And I could not believe that I wasn't hearing more about these people. And then fast forward to, No Trouble and myself, getting together and creating the series, that directly came out of that Zoom call.
Yay.
So there you go. So I'm excited you're here today because you are, in many ways, directly responsible for the existence of the Wonder Women series.
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
You are too, because we wouldn't have gotten those women together if you and I didn't have the relationship that we do. And when I was reaching out and feeling like it was hard to connect to other female bass players, and you were like, just gotta find the right ones. You gotta find, gotta open the door. That was because of you. So we're a team.
That's true. And I think the universe had a hand in it too, because the absolute right people walked in the absolute right moment as you asked the question, and it's funny how those things just kind of, they just do what they do. All right, Nalani, I want to MC an intro for you. We'll see how this goes. Nalani is a bassist, vocalist, entertainer in the Nashville area, known for her versatility and her showmanship. She has performed with and is mentored by some of the most legendary names in the bass world. These greats include Victor Wooten, Chuck Rainey, Reggie Wooten, Roy Futureman Wooten, Bakithi Kumalo, Bobby Vega, Rhonda Smith, and Marcus Miller. Schooled in jazz performance with a bachelor's degree from William Patterson University, but is mastered in all styles through 15 plus years of live experience. Nalani has become known for her expertise in all genres. Nalani stands out as one of the funkiest and best pocket players in Music City, as well as a master of serving and guiding the audience in joyous and ecstatic experience. I've been there, I've seen that, it's true. You can find her playing regularly in Nashville and across the United States with her own projects, The Nalani Effect, Rory and Nalani, and Voda, or serving in bands like Reggie Wooten and Friends, Lydia Britton and the Royal Family, San Rafael, Heidi Burson, and Catfish Seminar, as well as many other varying Nashville-based artists. Welcome to the interview, Nalani.
Thank you.
So, you know, it's called Wonder Woman, and every, when you go to the comics, every single one of them has an origin story. So, what is your origin story? What's the first instrument you played? How did you come to the bass? Give us a scoop.
Okay. Wow. My origin story. I was always surrounded by music. My mom is a huge music fan, supporter, booked music at festivals. My dad's a singer-songwriter, so I was always around music. But my most of my experience with music was in a live setting at lots of different festivals and concerts because my mom would take me everywhere. And so I got to see the power of how an audience and a performer interact with each other in that precious moment that's so unique and always changing. And my favorite band when I was little was a female bass player led band called Laura Love. And Laura Love, she was a badass. Can I say that? Am I allowed to curse? I should probably work on that.
You're good. You're good. It's your
Laura Love.
You do you.
It's so vivid in my memory. She was up front and center slapping the bass. That was like so clear to me as a kid that she was hitting the bass, and she was singing and dancing, doing all that all at once. And on top of it, she would remember me every time she saw me at her shows. And so it was like I got to develop this relationship as a little girl. She signed my headband. It felt very personal. So she was the first example for me of a female on bass, but it was more the way she related to the audience and at least made me feel like an essential part of the experience. And that's what a lot of the performers that I grew up watching was like the key, was they made every audience member feel like the show wouldn't have happened without them. That their presence and the way they danced or the way they interacted was an important piece of the whole experience. So when I was 11, my mom surprised me with a bass. And it was actually a surprise. I kind of I'd forgot that I asked for a bass. So it showed up in my lap. I was like, is this a thing I'm going to do? I don't know. And as soon as bass came into my world, everything opened up. I think people got excited to see a young girl on the bass, and bass players that I knew were giving me advice and telling me who to check out, and that's how I found Victor Wooten. I didn't know who Victor Wooten was until Hazel Miller's bass player, TJ. Hazel Miller's my music mama, in Boulder, Colorado, Denver, Boulder area in Colorado, and he was the one that said, you should go to Victor's bass camp. I was only 13. And I didn't even know who Victor was, and that was kind of the beginning. Yeah.
So how was the camp experience for you? Just
Yeah, well, the relationship with the Wootens started when I was 13. We first went to the show, and I was like a little kid, wide-eyed up on the front of the like on the front of the stage, and uh, Reggie was blazing away, and Victor was blazing away, and Divinity was thumping and rapping, and they all made a point to make a personal connection at the end of the show. And so for like 2 years, I was like, I want to go to the camp. I want to go to the camp. I want to go to the camp. So when I was finally old enough to go, that was 2005. It was really a magical experience. The camp at the time, because I wasn't very technical, I'd only been playing bass for a few years, and I wasn't ever really at that time motivated to work on chops. I was really into groove, and I was playing a lot of blues, and um, really okay with the repetition of the bass, and certain bass lines and styles. And so going to the camp was really validating because it was okay wherever I was at. There were a lot of people who were, playing like Victor and doing, when they introduce themselves on the bass, that's like one of the first things you do. You have to introduce yourself on the instrument. That they were like all over the place, and I played Superstition and sang it and just kept it laid back and groovy. And the camp was really a huge pivot point for me because it opened the door for all the relationships that I've developed over the years. That's where I met Chuck Rainey. That's where I first met Marcus Miller. Of course, left there with a close connection with Victor, the Wooten brothers, and Victor's family. And I remember one of the classes Chuck Rainey was teaching was what he was like 151, 151. That was the lesson, 151. And that was just all those little lessons. I got so many little gems that now looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, that actually tracks. That actually fits in what I'm doing now. And I've decoded some of it now too. It was special too because there was that camp. Victor said that camp was the first time they really started talking about like the spiritual nature of music. Like they had been leaning towards that, but there was one group like masterclass where we really opened into that. And I always was relating music to spirituality, even as a kid. It always made sense. And so the nature of the camp and Reggie's wisdom of how music is the whole universe. All of that kind of came together, and it wasn't long after that they started developing the Spirit of Music camp. So all of that was it was magical. I can't believe it was only 6 days. There was so much in that. And the greatest thing was just like kind of the heart connection. I was one of 2 kids that were 15 that went to the camp. There were 64 people. I was one of 4 women out of 64 bass players. And I was only 15. So it was, it all felt really precious and bright, enlivening.
so you are also a doubler. When did you pick up upright? When that
I,
became a story?
I picked up upright, I guess it was like junior year, so 16 or 17. I was in jazz band and playing electric. then I don't remember who it was. There's, various bass players, like just being in the jazz world, hearing that tone, it kind of felt like I had to go the upright direction. There weren't many, there weren't like any upright players in my school in the jazz band. I think there's like a maturity that that comes from approaching this instrument, and and so I started taking lessons to learn the upright. And I didn't have an upright. Actually, the orchestra teacher let me borrow the school bass, and invited me to play in the orchestra, even though I had no skills or knowledge on the instrument. And so at the same time of me starting to play orchestra, I started taking upright bass lessons, and then eventually got comfortable with actually walking bass lines in the jazz band, which that took a while. It was it's a serious instrument. I remember when I met Stanley Clark, he was like, "Oh, you're starting to play upright. The electric's gonna become like a toy." And it's true. Like it's to me, they're really two different instruments. The notes are the same, but the way I relate to them, the way I improvise on them, the way I practice, it's just my brain has to switch a lot.
How do you structure your practice around the instruments? Is it basically like, do you address them based on what projects you have going on? Do you have a routine where you incorporate both instruments? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Usually my practice is built around performance, about what's coming up, whatever project I'm working on. I play for so many different artists. I'm learning so much music all the time. It gets away from me being able to just be in the shed. So like with my upright, I spent so many years in college. William Patterson was really a jazz conservatory style program that the upright was really a focus. So fortunately, I had a lot of mileage hours of just being on that instrument, that it was more natural for a long time. So I wish I'm in a process of figuring out my rhythm of wanting to really support my technique development, and being in the joy of practice. When I'm in it, I am in awe. I'm in awe of like how the notes connect, how harmony relates, how the major scale is. It seems so basic, but it's mind blowing, and I get to fall in love with my hands and really be present with how amazing it feels to play music and to like navigate. There's this problem solving. So yeah, I get really in awe when I finally get time to really be in it. I've never been a good practicer. I've always been very externally motivated. So this is something that I've really been working on pulling inward lately.
You grew up in Denver, Colorado? Yes?
Just outside of Boulder.
Just outside of Boulder. Okay. I knew it was Colorado. So, and you're in Nashville now. So, what for you in your life were the signs and indicators that it was time to make the change?
I was kind of a nomad. Out of school, I really wasn't sure if I was going to continue playing music, because after 4 years of conservatory jazz program intensity, I and not doing the performance part, which is what I fell in love with, like the being able to really connect with a large audience and put on a show, the showmanship and the entertainer thing, made me kind of feel like I needed to take a step back. And so I followed my boyfriend who was in the Air Force. I followed him around to Texas and then Virginia. And when we were in Texas, I thought I was gonna like not bill myself as a musician. I was working on some healing work, and I was like, I'm just gonna make sure people. I'm gonna not let people know I'm a musician. But the first day, I think we walked into an open mic, and the woman was like, "Do y'all sing?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it was over. I worked at an art compound, art community, like just doing office work and managing the office. And my boss had all these gatherings with the art community and like a craft fair. And every time they would get on me if I didn't bring my bass to perform. They hired me at the Fine Arts Museum, so I got like my first experience of playing solo for 3 hours, just accompanying myself on the upright and singing. So those guys, San Angelo really saved my relationship with music. I started writing, and I got lots of opportunities to be a front man and do my thing, and move the audience. So when I broke up with my boyfriend, I was like floating around. I was between New York, where my grandmother was, I was in Colorado, where my mom was, and then my friend from Base Nature Camp had a house out here. He was going to Belmont, so I would come visit Nashville. So I was just kind of bouncing around, and visiting Nashville was really to do lessons with Reggie Wooten, the teacher. I had known Reggie and taken some lessons on and off over the years, but that year, 2014, I came to Nashville like 2 or 3 times, and right before that, Victor invited me to ride on the tour bus with them, the Wooten brothers, for a couple days, and I think it was his way of kind of letting me see if this was really what I wanted to do, see what the lifestyle is like to be a musician on the road, and because that's really that's the push still, is wanting to continue traveling and bring my music out further. And I got to really experience that, and that really was kind of where my relationship with Reggie as a mentor and a teacher developed more. And with all the Wooten brothers, they really kind of wholeheartedly answered any questions I had, included me, let me help at sound check. I got to play the bass, the upright, so Victor could check the tone. And so that was kind of like the spark that really was like, the Wootens have been in my life and been really supportive. And Reggie's way of teaching was a really great contrast to the university approach. And it's how many years later? It's 2014. I really started studying with Reggie. A lot of the things that at school was trying to teach me are finally coming together through his masterful guidance. So really, that was like the big motivating factor, was it's time to, because I'd spent so long like wondering if I wanted to really do this thing. And Reggie was a really good anchor for that, to come and study with him. I was just going to come for a couple months. I was like, let me just go to Nashville and I'll just stay for a couple months and like just be able to, 40 days and 40 nights kind of study the music with him and really devote myself to it. And I think 3 days in, I was like, I just need to stay. I started looking for work, and I found a place to live, and I just never left.
You have a project called the Nalani Effect. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, the Nalani Effect is always evolving as far as the players, the dynamic of who's going to be playing. Fortunately, in Nashville, we have such a great selection of people to reach out to. But my usual guitar player is Reggie. And I've found some really amazing drummers through Reggie, and the idea really being most anchored in the groove, whatever genre that is, whatever style we're playing, always to keep people moving. Um, and so we do like some jazz fusion, we do some standard old school funk. I love playing what people know, because there's a special resonance that comes from, um, if they recognize it and they've danced to it before and that they have a connection with it. You have them, you pull them in, and we do all sorts of crazy things, like use my stage clicks wireless system to get into the crowd and spin the guitars. I love doing all the tricks and the flashy stuff. I really enjoy the entertainment, and so the Nalani effect is like rock and roll energy applied to every genre based in the funk.
Being a musician is usually a life of self-employment. We're working for ourselves. Maybe we manage to pull a team together that helps us. It involves a lot of long days, motivation, and the ability to be a self-starter. How do you stay motivated and inspired?
I breathe a lot. Breathing. I'll always trying to anchor deeper into myself. I also do other creative practices. I've always been a painter and an artist, and just anything in the creative world. So there's a studio here called Art and Soul that I became a member of in 2018, and that kind of is my creative sanctuary, where I get to explore following the creative process in lots of different mediums, whether it's music or whether it's painting or whether it's movement. And so that's kind of been a really amazing auxiliary support, that continues getting me more into that internal space that we were talking about earlier, and becoming more and more authentic to what moves me. So what really motivates me in the end is tapping into that place, whatever that place is that we tap into when we're being creative, when we're writing, when we're improvising, when we're painting, going into that place. When I'm really present with that, then everything's easy, and can see the path clearly. I do love when things are crazy. It does help. That's another way that the path seems clear. Is like if things are really busy and it's like, well, I have no other option but to do this and then do that and then do this and then do that. So I keep on thinking that I need to like clear my plate and make things more relaxed, but I realize I'm really motivated by the kick in the butt that I get from having a lot on my plate.
In some of the materials you sent me, you mentioned teaching an online class in the creative process.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's something that's open to the broader public or whatnot, but I was curious if you could tell us more about your online class in the creative process.
Yeah. The online class is called Time Out, and it actually started during the pandemic. It's based on a class called Creative Arts Discovery and Practice. And it is open to the broader public. You can find it online at artandsoulnashville.com. For a while, Time Out was happening every week during the pandemic, every Friday, because we didn't have the studio to go to. It was done from home. And it integrates different meditative practices in relationship to movement, sounding with your voice, and then applying that to whatever creative art form once you get into that mind space. Then moving from there into whatever creative art form you're working with. So there have been people who filmed themselves dancing in their yard with fabric, people who do collage, people who wrote compositions. It goes so many different directions. So we have like a designated time where it's kind of free play and you do whatever it's really about having the space to follow whatever your creative self is drawn to. And that's often like your child self, your playful self. So I've been slowly figuring out how to apply that same to my music, because music has always been so driven by it being my career. So I'm learning how to use that same practice into creating space for just making sounds on my instrument. So the class is definitely open to the public. It's just dependent on the schedule, and they book pretty far out, so you can find it at artandsoulnashville.com. I also want to say something that really motivates me in general is the connection, whenever that is, connecting with people, connecting with the music, connecting with oneself. That's kind of been a thread my whole life. I remember when I was in high school, that's why I decided to say I was going to go for music and go to school for it and everything, was because at that time I could see that music was and is one of the most powerful ways to create connection with massive amounts of people at once. So the performance and the connection that comes from moving an audience, sharing one's whole self, that is definitely how do they say it? Modus operandi? I think that's what they call it. a core motivation for me.
You've been mentored and taught by many legends, Reggie and Victor and Marcus. What is some advice you've been given? Give us a few snippets of advice that you'd like to share.
Okay, one-liners. Marcus, one of the biggest things that stuck with me for a long time that Marcus said was, you don't choose music, music chooses you. And in some ways, I really feel that. I feel like there's been so many times that I thought I was going to abandon music, and it just wouldn't let me go. But then again, my experience of it is just like any relationship, I have to choose every day. And if I really want to keep progressing, I really have to choose. Victor, when I was in college, I was complaining to him that I said that I felt like college took the joy out of music for me. And he said, did college do that or did you? Which is not usually Victor's tone, right? Victor's a super softy guy, but at that time I really needed to hear that. And it's kind of in the same vein of like not being a victim to my circumstances, and just, do I want to do this or not? Is it mine or not? And then Victor often talks about not practicing. He'll say that's like one of the things at the camp that when I was young was really encouraging, is like, oh, I don't have to pressure myself to practice. Of course, Reggie's is the other way. He says practice forever. So between those two worlds, I've figured out and I'm learning that from Victor, let practice be play. Find the awe, the joy. Um, and then from Reggie, man, if you don't get those reps in, you will lose it. You will. It's true. I mean, in my mind, I might know how to do something, but there's like a special grace that we get given if we keep going. And like you can repeat the same thing over and over and over and over again, and then all of a sudden something magical happens, something new shows up, or you fall into a groove, or there is something really special about repetition. And I see that in life too. Whatever you repeat, you become. So those are three biggies. I already talked about Chuck Rainey's 151, and I've reinterpreted that as he always says that, oh, all I was playing was 151, 151, and then you listen to like Rock Steady, and there's like all these little fills in there, and you're like, that is not all you're playing. And I realized that for me, what I've interpreted that as is that it's anchored. You can always be anchored in this relationship between the 1 and the 5, and you can bounce. You can use that as a rhythmic pull. But that's where you're targeting. So if you're doing any fills, if you're running around the bass, that's still your anchor. God, I'm so honored to have. I had another interview. I had to prepare for that made me tell my story, and I just am so in awe of the people that have been in my life and that have welcomed me and welcomed relationships, and especially these super bass players who make me feel really privileged.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I, I was nodding my head a lot. Some of my students, I use the metaphor, if you want to have a relationship with music, like with anything, like if you have a pet or something, you have to feed it, you have to nurture it, you have to spend time with it, you have to bond with it. What happens to that pet if you don't? It goes goes across the street and finds somebody who's going to feed it and pet it and love it. And, I was just nodding because I'm like, yeah, nail on head. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Reggie says, how does he say it? Basically a similar thing, like the music will go to who's honoring it. Music, its own entity, will go to who's really honoring it. I mean, that's spirit, that's life. Music, whatever you want to call it. and also, Reggie, he said, just touch your bass every day. Just touch it. Just touch it. You don't even have to like pull a string, but at least acknowledge it. That was really helpful when I was having trouble picking up the bass. And the way I convinced myself for that was, if I was walking down the street and I ran into a friend, I wouldn't ignore them. I would say hi. I would give them a hug, even if we were in passing and I gotta go. So it's the same thing. If anytime, like, why would I not acknowledge my bass as I'm walking past it? Trying to treat it like that.
I broke my hand,
Yeah.
not knowing you saying this now. I used to sit in this chair and sometimes just put my bass in my lap and just drape the broken hand over it, or whatnot. So I think you just put words to that experience for me. Thank you. I'm not sure what I was getting out of it, but it was comforting.
I've heard, kind of watched a little bit of your story with that journey, and I commend you. I can't imagine how hard that would be to be without access.
A lot of things you're mentioning tie in, and I want to take away from your story right now, but just continuing the relationship, going to your basses every day and touching them. But like I said, you just put words to that whole experience for me. And then when my hands are coming back, just going to the bass and the repetition every day. And it is invitation. Things do show up. Getting the motor skills back. My brain remembers my songs, but the hands, oh, yeah, they were happily checked out there for a while.
When you do pause, there's something new that shows up too. There's something about, I've been learning how to integrate that into practice, like just take a short break so that when you come back. So, I mean, you took a long break. But the awareness that shifts there, it all adds up to being a better player, more present at least.
Agreed. I would hope anyway. Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom here, folks. I hope you're enjoying this. So,
I am.
yeah, actually, yeah, I am quite a bit too. They're just along for the ride at this point. Describe to us a day in the life of Nalani. Day in the life.
Yeah, man, it's so sporadic. Every day is different. I like to do some sort of movement in the morning, so there's multiple days where I go rock climbing, which is one of my favorites. I did that as a kid and started in January really getting back into it. And so yeah, if I don't do rock climbing, I'll try to do some sort of yoga or go for a hike. My workouts are really joy oriented. And my days are often filled with teaching, whether I'm driving around to get to a student or jumping online to do that, teaching private voice and bass lessons. I was doing a little bit of beginner guitar for a while, but bass and voice are really my my jam. And a lot of my days are filled with preparing for various gigs coming up, whether it's my own or learning music for the bands. I have lots of bands that do a lot of cover music, a few bands that do original music, and so it's kind of whatever's right in front of me is what needs to get taken care of. So my day, it's funny looking at like the logistics of my day, it seems like not very much, but it gets filled up really fast. And then usually my downtime is either with Netflix or I got turned on to some video games for the first time. I never grew up with video games, so I will sometimes play Zelda on the Nintendo Switch when Taylor, my boyfriend, doesn't have it with him on the road. But yeah, like I'll practice while I'm watching TV. I like getting my reps in that way. And then Music City, if I can, go support my friends. There's always somebody I know playing. So try to go check out some music. There's quite a few auxiliary volunteer events that I do. Like there's the Soul Vibes Global, which is kind of like a jam, but it's an organized jam. So it's almost like karaoke on instruments in the sense that we have a list of songs that we're going to play and a roster of hundreds of musicians. And I organize the bass players. And so like in August, it's going to be the Gap Band. And so we have a set list. You send it out to all the musicians. They send in their request of which songs they want to play. And then I assign the bass players to songs. The piano coordinator assigns piano players. The drum coordinator assigns drummers. And so you never really know who you're going to end up playing with. And then when you show up, we do have an option for a rehearsal, but a lot of bands don't get to rehearse, so you just show up and you play it exactly like the recording. And it's a wild night. It's a really amazing place for a community. So that takes up time, organizing that, showing up to that, running that. So yeah, it's hard to say what a day looks like, but those are all pieces that end up getting mixed up in my day. I have a regular church gig, which has helped. It helped me through the pandemic. It helped me through a lot. Nashville is great for paying church gigs. Um, I'm all, on Saturdays. I'm always making sure to work on the music for that. So yeah, those are kind of it. Of course, sometimes I don't. I'm not teaching art classes right now, but there are days when I'm going to the art studio, or I'm just going there to play or take some space and do some creative practices.
So, a lot of us had to grow our skill sets during the pandemic. You know, all kinds of things. We had to get more into video or, you know, learn about cameras and ISO settings, maybe things we didn't have to think about before because we had to become a little bit more self contained to get our products out there. What are you most curious to learn about this year? What are you working on?
I really I'm really curious about the social media techniques. I have some really inspiring friends who have developed amazing followings just in a couple years. So the reels on Instagram and TikTok, I see some really positive responses, and mostly I don't know how engaging those audiences really are, but for me that's really important for, I feel, for my next step is wanting to be able to build my following, my presence online, um, so that then I can move forward with the live stuff, which is what I really love, you know, finding more opportunities to bring the Nalani effect out there. And also with that, the video, what you're doing, all the editing and everything, just I really do want to bring more content out there because I have been getting a lot of feedback that it's like people are waiting are waiting for me to share, and put it out there more, and it seems so simple. But it's really not for me. It's been quite a block for a long time, and I have tried to make a few reels, and I have some editing learning to do. So that's kind of really a big one for me, and just developing my relationships with venues. I have a few that have finally started approaching me, and so that's opening a new thing, a new set of skills of really running my show, doing the booking and the managing myself.
What's something you've done one time in your career that you can't wait to do a second time if given the opportunity?
Um, July 4th last year, I wasn't on bass, but I got to be a part of the Reggie Booten and Friends show, and performed with them in front of, well, they said that 400,000 people came into Nashville for that event. We're guessing there was probably 300,000 people in the audience. And it was amazing. It's like you couldn't see the end of the people. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be a part of the show, and at the last minute, Reggie and Ron D, his dancer hype man, brought me on and made me a part of the show, and that was effortless. There was no stage fright. There was no nothing. It was like, woo, this is what I'm meant to be doing. and I know Reggie's show so well. When they do their thump off, he's got certain moves I know about. So I was anticipating him needing someone to hold the guitar while he thumped it from behind his back. And so I was really in the flow of their rhythm, and there was one moment, there's a picture on my Instagram, where I'm underneath his guitar, Reggie's playing it backwards, and Taylor is behind me holding the guitar, so I'm like sandwiched between them, and I'm looking out at the audience, And there was a moment of, you know, being dramatic and in awe of Reggie's craziness. And I went from like, oh my God, to this dude's crazy, right? And I felt the audience shift just from me changing my facial expression. That I don't know if they laughed or they applauded. I don't know what it was. And I didn't know why until I saw the picture. It was, my face was how big on this Jumbotron. And that was like, knowing how to move a crowd, even with one look, that's the thing. So I cannot wait to perform in front of 350,000 people or more. Again.
Fabulous. Dangerous question. You can say pass. You don't have to answer. But I want to ask it because I feel like we should, especially female artists. What is something you're not getting credit for that you absolutely should be getting credit for?
Interesting. That makes me curious. What does credit mean? I'm curious. That makes me curious. Like, what would that look like if I was getting credit? What would that look like for me?
I'll give you some backstory as to the reason this question is even in my interviews. So I want to go back to the Zoom call, and you said something really interesting in your telling of your story that resonated with me, and I watched the faces on screen. It resonated with everybody else. I will take this out if it's too much of your story.
Yeah.
You said doing so much work in college that you didn't get credit for.
I said that.
Yeah.
And
yeah. I've done that slog too. And so I put that question in because I was thinking about you when I wrote that. I've asked that of a lot of artists because I think if I offer them the microphone to talk about their truth on something, I'd like to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So, credit could mean whatever it is to you.
Yeah.
You actually inspired the question, though.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, if I go back to that, what this question came from, that's a solid example for me of, I basically was a double major in college. I took voice lessons. I took 2 voice lessons, classical and jazz, bass lessons, piano private lessons. Oh yeah, I can teach piano too. I forgot that I do that. Piano private lessons. I was required to be in 2 ensembles a semester for my vocal degree, because voice was actually my major. But I was in 1 ensemble, and then I was in the vocal ensemble. That was 2. But then I was usually very often in at least 2, maybe 3. I think at one time I think 3 was my max ensembles, but I was also in orchestra. And look at all the things I continue to pile onto my plate. I was also in orchestra. I served on student government. And then in the honors department, I took art classes. I integrated my art and music again in the creative process. I'm trying to think what else. So there were a lot, especially all those ensembles I took. I was also in the Latin jazz band. So I was in a lot of extra classes that I got credit for, but they didn't go towards any degree. Like, I had the credits, technically. So when I graduated from school, I was way beyond my required limit. Every year I did 2 juries. Sometimes they let me split it, where I had 6 songs on bass and 6 songs on voice. But all that, I could have, if we actually looked at all my credit, I probably could have gotten a double major, but I didn't technically get a degree in both. bass and voice, which is okay. But I do know somebody who got a degree in classical piano and jazz performance, and so I feel proud that all that work is helping pave the way for those opportunities for people to have the piece of paper that says the work that they did. But now that doesn't really matter to me. You know, the paper, what, for me, credit comes from what opportunities am I getting? That's when I feel like I've actually accomplished, is if people want to hire me, you know, or if I've been hired and then they want to hire me again. That to me says I'm getting credit for what I've done because it means I get to keep going. For a while, I felt like I wasn't getting credit for I felt like I wasn't getting credit for what the work I was putting on my instrument. And that came in the form of me feeling like I wasn't getting work. So that's why I say it that way, is I realize, like, when I'm working, I feel like I'm getting credit because people want to, they acknowledge what I'm doing, and they want to use it. Yeah, it's interesting that how I value it in that way. When I got invited to be a part of Victor's yearly gathering with Nashville bass players on, like, the first of the year, he started it inspired by Ron Carter's January 1st gathering of bass players, and they do that in New York, and it's very personal. It's like familial community. And in 2000 it was either 18 or 19, was the first time I was actually invited to be a part of that. And I waited multiple years. I knew it was happening because I was in the community of the Wooten world. There were many years that I felt like I should have been a part of that, and I wasn't. And so when I finally did, I realized, when I finally got invited as a player, that was like, oh, I'm actually one of the players. It's not just because of my relationship with Victor. It's not just because of my friendship. It's actually because I've reached a point.
You had grown enough at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel fortunate that the credit that I've got, oh, gosh, what a weird question. You might cut this whole thing out, but I'm realizing,
I'm totally good with that.
But I'm just realizing what this is bringing up for me is that if I don't feel like I'm getting credit, it means there's probably something I need to be working on.
Boom, slam dunk. I put that in there. I will, and we might be cutting all this out too again. When you were telling your story, I technically have on my transcript 3 degrees: music history, audio recording, and bass.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was a fight just to get to where I had to go. And I did that in 5 years. And I also switched majors from a journalism degree. So something resonates in being that person. Now, obviously I had a journey to go on. So, you know, sometimes there is that feeling, but I think you hit it with, when you have grown to a point, mm-hmm. you will get the credit for that work.
Yeah.
So in the term of opportunities.
Yeah, and I think that's something in the female dynamic that sometimes we don't look at. That it's easy as a woman to be like, I'm not getting this opportunity because I'm a woman. I'm not getting this opportunity because, they don't accept me, or, there's been a couple times where it's very clearly, they're like, sorry, we can't have any girls on the road because they don't want a separate room, or they're not comfortable with having, because of some sexual thing, that they're worried about the wives or the girlfriends, which I think is insane. But you know, it's been a few really clear times, and it's very clear when it's because of my gender dynamic. The times that I don't get opportunities is probably because I'm not what they need, not because of my whether I have boobs or not. You know, it's usually and to me that I value that so much, because I think it's easy for us to, or it was for me, especially in college. I thought it was because, you know, I didn't have a lot of friends in college. I didn't feel really accepted in the community because I was the weakest player. I had all these ideas in my head about where I was at in relationship to the other players. And I did put the female dynamic on there, that I said, you know, it's because I was a girl and one of only a few women in the program. That's not why. It was a combination of things. There was a lot of work I needed to do to feel confident and to relate to the way that other people were playing. And I isolated myself because of my identity as a female and because of not feeling accepted. Then I pulled back even more. So I really, if we want to get credit, and if we really want, you know, if you want something, you really have to put in the work. And I want us women to, I think it's sometimes easy to cop out and just get by and settle for mediocrity. And not because it's our fault, but because we're not encouraged to excel. You know, it's a mental thing, not just in society, but in our own mindset. And it takes a lot to unravel that and really commit to, do I want to really develop this skill? And then I think you do get credit. Of course, I see some people, I feel like Reggie hasn't gotten the credit he deserves. You know, and there's quite a few people that he's turned me on to. So like in the industry, there's a lot of focus on media and marketing and what sells and what's quick and what's quick investment, rather than what's really lasting and legendary. Like all the music that I love to play is, you know, from the 70s and the 80s, and like this older Elvis Presley is a household name, right? This like legendary Dolly Parton. I mean, this is so funny that I'm talking about country music right now because I'm in Nashville, you know, but Jimi Hendrix, like this, like that level of devotion and mastery and authenticity is what lasts lifetimes beyond generations. And so there's people that I see that are phenomenal players that I wish they were getting to be more forward, so that their music that can last. But I wouldn't say that I'm one of those people that haven't had a chance to get their credit yet, because I feel like there's still so much I want to work on.
That's awesome. Great answer. Great answer. I know that was a difficult answer. I know it was a little bit of a hard question, maybe in some that it did bring some things up. You know, you did actually inspire the question. And it was when you related your experience, it brought up things for me. And like I said, I saw other people in the room also reacting. I was like, there's people here who have a story that's felt like Reggie, some of these other players who have done a lot of work and not been seen. I think J.D. Simo is one of those players. He's a phenomenal guitar player.
See, and I don't know who that is.
Go look him up.
JD Simos. I did bring up my
Yeah.
thing so I could take notes for things
Yeah.
I learned from you.
Also, what was true for you at one moment a year and a half ago in the middle of a pandemic may
Hmm.
not be feeling true anymore.
Yeah.
And that reality can also exist.
Hmm.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Well, and in that conversation, I know what was coming up for me was me feeling like I didn't have ownership over what I've developed because I've always had teachers holding my hand all the way through. And I'm getting emotional about it now because that's still a part of me that I'm trying to figure out how to have it that internal motivation. And but then looking at my history, it's like, oh, how lucky am I to have had these amazing teachers, and that I can go I can literally go take a lesson with Reggie every day if I want. When we're preparing for a gig, I do see him almost every day for like 5 days so that I make sure that I'm giving him exactly what he wants and that the groove is perfect so that he can dance.
I think that for what I may read, and this is just me, um, is that your college experience with doing the work and trying to be seen
Hmm.
and trying to be the player that you wanted to be is distinctly different from your current reality with
Yeah,
these different mentors who teach entirely differently and in a way that suits you better,
yeah,
connects with you better. That would be my read on that. You are very blessed to have that. And you can acknowledge that. But you can also acknowledge, and I'm not saying that you are acknowledging it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there was a different experience for you at one point,
hmm,
and that may have left you with that feeling. But you also have grown and changed, and you see it differently over time.
yeah. I think that's where I'm always trying to get to is that if I work on myself, all of us, right? Like I think one of your questions, what do you support? What cause do you support? It's like if I keep working on myself and improving that and knowing myself better and getting down to that core and like peeling away all the conditioning that has told me otherwise, um, then then there's almost a talk about Wonder Woman. There's an invincibility aspect that you can get, um, and that's what I didn't have in college. Was I was in like kind of a victim mindset, and that was what I really needed to learn. Less so than you know, I need to learn that more than the technique or get the recognition or be seen as one of whatever. It's like, oh, actually I needed to just work on myself, and now I have years 10 years of being out of that school and finally kind of undoing that mindset. um, and that's, I think, one of the big things, one of my missions, especially in women in anything, but in the bass world or in any skill that we're developing. um, how can you really be honest about what you're doing, what you're developing, the commitment you have? Do you really want to put in the work? And developing a skill, really developing a skill and diving in that deep, um, is really humbling. And I think that's something that's missing when we talk about I deserve credit, or I'm a victim of the fact that I'm a minority, or I'm a all of that. So that's been the biggest shift. Was I look at that and I realize I was a big player in the experience that I had there. Good thing we grow and change.
Okay, well said, and great way to take ownership. But once you do that, you've got it, you know?
Yeah, and it's forever growing. cool thing about music is it will carry you through for lifetimes. It's going to grow with that same development of self.
You've been organizing the lunches at NAM and, you know, creating a community. So tell us, what do you visualize, potential futures, or what do you see going forward with the female meetup, lady bass player meetup at NAM?
Gosh, I love all the women that we've brought together. And my core motivation of connection, that motivates me on stage, is one thing, but the more intimate connection in these group settings, is definitely one of my jams. And it's so satisfying to see, the energy, the bubbly, the support that comes from people coming together, and specifically the female bass players, because we have this this merging of like the masculine wisdom of the devotion to the instrument, this like technical discipline, and then the fluffy feminine, and flow energy. And so the merging of all that is just juicy. So I'm happy if we just keep getting together for lunches. Just to see the interactions and the relationships and the friendships. But I've had lots of ideas come in. I would love for it to develop into something more. Hopefully something where we can expose people to these amazing women, these awesome players, as well as create a space, like an organized space where we can really learn from each other. Because that was one thing I learned from that 6-hour Zoom call, was that I want this, but I want to create more structure for it. And if we could focus on one person for an hour, so many people have so many skills in different areas of the music industry. So that I'm working on some ideas, and I would love some support. I was thinking of getting a call together to just kind of talk about some ideas of how it could develop. But I think what I'm seeing is some sort of maybe forum, or that's not the word, like a master class, or a panel where we can peer into this world of female bass players, this unique perspective, whether it's us as a group talking to greats and asking questions of great players that we know, or if it's teaching each other, sharing our skills. And then my hope is to figure out how to share that with the music community at large, and just have a place for, I think it's a unique perspective to hear the kinds of questions we ask, the things that we think about, or the ways that we support each other, or the creative projects that come out of these relationships. So yeah, I'm hoping to develop a little more structure, but I'm also enjoying just the gentle coming together.
Starting your career over again from day one, what would you do differently, if anything?
I would get a band booking young, like get playing with a band at 13, and get experience reaching out to venues and getting out there. I was fortunate to have experience sitting in with other bands at a young age. But right now, I'm finally, as a band leader, trying to put myself out there. And I've been really intimidated with the concept of just doing the cold calls, the cold emails. this is what I do. Don't you want to have me? Don't you want the Nalani effect? I feel like if I had had that experience early, that would, I wish I had more mileage under my belt with that. Um, yeah, that would be awesome.
What advice would you have for high school students looking to go into music school and applying for college?
I would say that if you're considering going into music school, that you make sure that you look into what else you're going there for. That it's not just focused on music, because you can always, there's so many tools and so many teachers and so many online easy access. I mean, you can study with Reggie Wooten online from wherever you are in the world. He's literally like, give my phone number to anybody. I mean, it's so accessible, so many, and masters, especially after the pandemic, so many people who weren't teachers are now teachers. So if it's a matter of really learning the music, you don't have to go to school for it. But if there's something you really want to get out of the college experience, to make sure that you're looking at that too. And maybe those teachers whatever teacher you really want to study with, or whoever you think you really can get that information from, maybe that's a teacher at a university or a college or a musician's institute or something like that. So finding your teacher, whether that's in the school or out of the school, and then being really clear about why you want to go there. Maybe you want to go to Miami Frost School of Music so that you can be in Florida and you can be around that scene. Or maybe you want to go to New York so that you can experience the New York City thing without having to pay normal rent. Or maybe, you can do student loans for that. But I would say if you're going to school, to be really clear about what you're getting out of it, and that if you really want to be devoted to the music, be really clear about who you want to be studying with.
Where can folks find your album?
Oh, this is still kind of new to me. I released the album in 2019 and I'm still not good at promoting it. But I'm on Apple Music, Spotify, all that stuff. And pretty much anywhere. I think CD Baby did all my distribution, so they do everything. And I have an album and I have a few single releases that are just upright, some jazz standards.
Nalani, this has been a fantastic interview. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. I know you've always got something going on, so your plate is full. So thanks for taking the time today. Thanks for this was a fantastic interview. I cannot wait to share it with the people who read the column. I'm excited. I hope they will be too. So, any final thoughts for our viewers?
Just first, thank you. I really admire what you're doing, and I'm glad you're doing it, because it's kind of what I was saying with our group, wanting to be able to bring it out to the world, and you're doing it, and so thanks for doing it so I don't have to. And for including,
You're welcome.
And just for the viewers, listeners, readers, I just want to be. My hope is to, in my performance, be a beacon for more and more authenticity, and anchoring into what's true. And in some places, there's like truth, there's clear truth, like Reggie says, there's music fact. not music theory, it's music fact. And in other ways, there's that personal truth. And so I hope to encourage people to just continue working on finding clarity on what it is that you want to work on, what it is you want to say, and getting more and more in touch with that, whittling away to the core.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Nalani.
Thanks, Brittany.
I hope I'll see you soon.
That'd be great.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
My safety's off. I'm ready to fire. I've been making all the rounds when I see you from the corner of my eye. Ooh, baby, you're my newest desire. You're my target, baby.